Love, they say, is blind. But how blind does someone have to be when in a relationship? How well do you know the people you get into a relationship with? What are the red flags to watch for? The downsides of second chances? And the pain that eventually comes with going back to the very thing that broke you once. This is the story of Edwina Angelica Martin, a woman who loved yet lost herself in the process. Welcome to True Crime IQ. Thank you, my viewers. Thank you for joining me as we unravel the chilling stories that keep us questioning the limits of trust, love, and betrayal. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest gripping tales. Stay tuned, because this is a case you won't forget. Edwina Angelica Martin's life should have been full of promise, full of love, success, and happiness. She was a mother, an entrepreneur, and a woman who dreamed of a brighter future. But for over a decade, Edwina lived in the shadow of fear, a fear so deep, it kept her trapped in a cycle of violence and manipulation, one that would ultimately take her life. But this is not just the story of a woman who was victimized. It's the story of a woman who fought against the odds, against her own heart, against a love that turned deadly. It's easy to ask why she didn't leave, but the truth isn't that simple. The truth is darker, more complicated. Edwina was caught in the web of trauma, where love and fear became indistinguishable. This story will take you inside that struggle. You'll witness firsthand the complexity of a relationship, where control masked as affection can feel like the only thing holding you together. March 27th, 2023. A day that should have been ordinary for Edwina became the day her life was tragically cut short. She was shot in her own home, left fighting for her life, with her last moments captured by an unfinished 911 call. The world lost Edwina that day, but so many questions remain. Why did she stay with him? Why didn't she leave sooner? And what was it that kept her in the grip of her abuser, even after he nearly killed her in the past? This is the story of Edwina's life, one marked by love, pain, and the shocking consequences of a betrayal that no one saw coming. But it's also a call for change. A call for us to understand, to do better, and to support the many like Edwina who remain silent, who suffer in the shadows, hoping for a way out, but often seeing none. As we dig deeper into the events that led to her tragic death, we'll uncover the hidden layers of her relationship with Danny Brown, a man whose charm and cruelty were intertwined in ways Edwina could never fully escape. The man who took everything from her, including the life of another man who loved her. But despite all that, Edwina's story isn't just a tragedy, it's a lesson, a call to action for us to break the cycle of abuse before it claims another victim. Edwina Angelica Martin was more than just a victim. She was a woman with dreams, with aspirations that reached far beyond the life she was living. She grew up in a close-knit community in Little Rock, where family and faith were the cornerstones of her world. From a young age, Edwina stood out for her kindness, her drive, and her desire to make a difference in the world. As a child, she was full of life and ambition. She dreamed of becoming someone who could help others, someone who could make an impact. Her goals weren't just big, they were filled with hope. She saw the world as a place full of opportunity, and she believed that anything was possible. Her childhood wasn't perfect, but it wasn't one of hardship either. She was loved by her family, and in their eyes, she could do no wrong. They watched her grow into a woman of strength, full of potential. She had the kind of spirit that people remembered long after they met her, and for a time, it seemed like her future was as bright as her smile. As Edwina grew into adulthood, her life was full of promise. Her dreams remained at the forefront of her mind. But like many young women, she was looking for love, someone who would stand by her side, share in her hopes, and build a future together. That's when she met Danny Brown. At first, Danny seemed to be everything Edwina could have wanted. He was charming, attentive, and quick to show affection. He made her feel special, and for someone as caring and ambitious as Edwina, his attention felt like the validation she had longed for. They spent time getting to know each other, sharing stories, building memories. To her he appeared like the kind of man who could make all her dreams seem possible. She believed in the person she saw in him, the man who laughed with her, who made her feel safe. To Edwina, he was everything she had been waiting for. But with time the cracks began to show. The first few hints were small, almost insignificant. Danny would make comments that seemed harmless, then quickly brush them off as jokes. He would become possessive, in ways that Edwina thought were just signs of affection. But what started as minor things, unsettling comments or unexpected outbursts, soon grew into something that couldn't be ignored. Her friends saw it. Her family noticed the shifts in her demeanor, though they struggled to put their finger on what was wrong. They all wanted to believe in the relationship, in the man who had once seemed so perfect. But behind the smiles, Edwina was beginning to question whether the love she felt was real, or just something she had hoped for. Before everything changed, Edwina's life was one of promise and ambition. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a woman with goals, a woman who carved her own path. Edwina pursued her education with determination, enrolling at the University of Arkansas. There, she poured her energy into her studies, aiming to build a future that was all her own. Her ambition wasn't just about degrees or accolades, it was about proving to herself that she could achieve anything she set her mind to. But Edwina's story wasn't only defined by her academic pursuits, she was a wife and a mother too. She was married to Danny Brown, and she had 2 children, Danny Maurice Brown II and Danielle Mashal Brown. They were the center of her world, and despite the struggles she faced, Edwina's love for them never wavered. She dreamed of a future where they could have everything she never did, where their possibilities were endless. Her entrepreneurial spirit also took flight. Edwina launched her own clothing line, Baha's Beauty Boutique, a brand that resonated with a loyal following. She built the business from the ground up, pouring her heart into every design, every decision. She was proud of what she had created, a piece of herself in every piece of fabric. Her boutique wasn't just a business, it was a symbol of her strength and independence. She showed the world that she was capable of so much more than anyone could have imagined. She was dedicated to her partner, and the life that they were going to build together. But unfortunately, Danny wasn't as invested in the relationship as she was. He wasn't there for her, and the children lacked the fatherly figure that would have helped shape their lives. Before, she thought it was just him being emotionally unavailable, but as life would have it, he was emotionally invested in another woman. When Edwina heard the devastating news, she couldn't understand why would he cheat on her. I mean, he told her he would stand by her and they would build a life together. She didn't know that she was wrong, totally wrong. The first time she called him out on his cheating behavior, he played it off, as though what she said wasn't important at all. The next time she confronted Danny Brown, he slapped her. It was a quick and thunderous one. Who was she to question him? That was what he asked her. She was tired and so done with the chaos that had to do with Danny Brown. That was when Edwina met Daniel Hill, a 22-year-old who would steal her heart. Daniel was different. He was caring, affectionate, and full of life. He showed Edwina what love could truly feel like, gentle, patient, and filled with respect. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. She felt seen. Their bond grew quickly, and for Edwina, Daniel represented everything good in the world. He was her peace, a bright light in a life that had known too much darkness. But even in this newfound happiness, Edwina was unaware of the dangers still lurking in her past. Her ex Danny Brown couldn't bear the thought of losing control over Edwina, of seeing her happy with someone else. Driven by jealousy and anger, he made a deadly choice. He paid 2 men, Gordon and Quentin Jones, $5,000 to take the lives of both Edwina and Daniel Hill. He specifically gave them orders to eliminate Hill and only wound Edwina. To him, he felt that due to the shock and trauma she'd be going through, she would be forced to come back to him. On that fateful day, the 2 men carried out Danny's order. They arrived with guns and no mercy. As they fired, the shots hit Daniel Hill in the chest and abdomen. He collapsed instantly, fatally wounded. Even as he fell, Daniel's last act was to shield Edwina, his love, from the barrage of bullets. His body took the brunt of the attack, and while Edwina was also struck, her wounds weren't fatal. She survived. But Daniel, he didn't. In the aftermath, Edwina was left in shock, covered in blood, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The man who had loved her, who had tried to protect her, was gone, taken in an instant, by a violence that was beyond her control. Daniel Hill died, because of the love he showed her, while Edwina was forced to carry the burden of that loss for the rest of her life. After the shooting, her ex, Danny Brown, was arrested. The evidence pointed to him as the orchestrator of the attack that left Daniel Hill dead and Edwina wounded. But what seemed like a clear-cut case, in the eyes of the law, soon became tangled in a web of confusion and fear. Edwina was left in an impossible position. Her life had been shattered, and now she was forced to decide whether to speak out against the man who had once been a part of her world, or remain silent to protect herself, and perhaps him. In the aftermath of the attack, the weight of trauma was heavy. Victims often face a choice that few outside their experience can understand. Do they fight for justice, or do they stay silent to avoid further harm? Edwina, in her confusion and fear, chose not to cooperate with the authorities. The decision wasn't easy. She was caught between the desire to move forward and the overwhelming pressure of everything she had been through. Her silence, however, had legal consequences. The charges against Danny Brown were eventually dropped, and he walked free. This is the complex reality many victims face. The choice to speak out is never simple, especially when the abuser is someone they once loved, someone they've shared their life with. Fear, manipulation, and trauma are powerful forces that complicate even the most clear-cut of decisions. Edwina wasn't just making a legal decision. She was making a decision about her safety, her future, and her emotional well-being. What often isn't understood is the immense pressure that victims are under in these situations. When your world is upended, when the person who caused the devastation is someone you once trusted, it's easy to feel trapped. For Edwina, the idea of cooperating felt like an impossible mountain to climb. In many ways, her silence was the only way she knew to survive. In the weeks following the violent attack, Edwina's life should have been about healing. It should have been a time for reflection, for understanding what had happened, and finding a path forward. Instead, just 4 weeks after the shooting that claimed Daniel's life, Edwina did something that shocked everyone. She married Danny Brown. To outsiders, it seemed like an unfathomable decision. How could a woman who had nearly been killed by this man turn around and marry him? But to understand Edwina's decision, we have to look deeper into the psychological effects of trauma, and how abuse can distort a victim's perception of reality. This is where the concept of trauma bonding comes into play. Trauma bonding occurs when a victim forms an emotional attachment to their abuser, often as a survival mechanism. In Edwina's case, the violence she experienced at Danny's hands was twisted into a cycle of manipulation. After the attack, Danny was the one to provide her with comfort. He was the one who promised her safety, even as he had been the one to instill the fear. He controlled her thoughts, made her question herself, and gave her moments of affection that kept her tethered to him. Domestic violence experts describe this cycle as dangerous and insidious. Victims often feel isolated, confused, and emotionally vulnerable. They may feel that their abuser is the only person who can offer them security, even when they know deep down that they should leave. Edwina's decision to marry Danny wasn't about love. It was about survival, dependency, and the psychological grip he had on her. Specialists in the field of domestic violence note that this phenomenon isn't rare. Victims often return to or remain with their abusers because they've been manipulated into believing they cannot survive without them. The abuser creates an environment of fear, then intermittently offers affection or reassurance, which keeps the victim in a constant state of emotional confusion. In Edwina's case, marrying Danny was a way of clinging to the only semblance of stability she knew, even though it was, in reality, a dangerous illusion. For Edwina, the love she once felt for Danny had been twisted into something darker, something that bound her to him in ways she couldn't easily break. It's a tragic reality that far too many victims of domestic violence face, the emotional manipulation that leads them to return to the very person who hurt them, thinking that they have no other choice. Once married, Edwina's life with Danny Brown was peaceful to say the least, or maybe that was what it looked like from the outside. Their social media was filled with pictures and videos of them as a happy couple, and for the next couple of years it seemed as though everything was going just fine. But gradually, the marriage became anything but peaceful. Despite the vows they exchanged, despite the promises of love and protection, the reality was far darker. The abuse didn't stop. It continued. hidden behind the closed doors of their home. Danny's control over Edwina tightened, becoming more methodical, more suffocating with each passing day. At first the signs were subtle. He would question where she was, who she was with, and why. He would make hurtful comments about her friends, isolating her from those who once supported her. The more Edwina tried to hold on to the life she once had, the more Danny chipped away at it. He controlled the finances, monitored her movements, and made her feel small, insignificant, like her only value came from his approval. The abuse wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychological, and often invisible to those around them. To the outside world, they seemed like any other couple, at least that's what Danny wanted people to believe. He was charming when they were in public, keeping up the appearance of a loving husband. To behind the scenes, Edwina's every move was watched, her every decision second-guessed, and her spirit slowly drained. The isolation she experienced was another cruel form of control. Her once thriving social life became non-existent. Friends grew distant, unsure of what was happening. They noticed that her social media wasn't as active as it used to be, and she was not her usual self. Edwina, in her own way, withdrew further into herself, believing she had no one left to turn to. As her confidence eroded, so did her sense of self-worth. Edwina's world shrank, her home became a cage, and the man she had once loved became a warden. Society, too, played a role. There was a stigma surrounding her situation. People often questioned why victims stayed, why they didn't leave their abusers. The whispers and judgment only made Edwina feel more alone, more trapped. The shame of her circumstances became another chain around her, preventing her from reaching out for help. But what many don't understand is the complexity of abuse. It's not just about physical violence, it's about control, manipulation, and the slow unraveling of a person's will. Edwina wasn't just fighting for her physical safety, she was fighting for her identity, for her belief in herself, in her worth. On March 27, 2023, Edwina left her workplace like she had done countless times before. She headed home, unaware that this would be the last time she would walk through those doors. By 4 p.m., the sound of gunshots shattered the peace of the neighborhood, echoing through the quiet streets. Inside her home, Edwina lay on the floor, blood pooling around her. Her phone, still open, displayed an unfinished 911 call. She had tried to reach out for help, but the violence was too swift, too overwhelming. Emergency responders arrived at the scene and found Edwina fighting for her life, but her wounds were grave, and there was no chance of survival. She was rushed to the University of Arkansas Medical Center, where at precisely 5:17 p.m., doctors pronounced her dead. It was the end of the cycle of abuse that had tortured Edwina for over 11 years. The cycle that began long before her first encounter with Danny and continued through years of manipulation, violence, and control. Finally, it had claimed her life. Inside Edwina's home, investigators found signs of a struggle. Her broken phone, discarded in a frantic attempt to call for help. Shell casings scattered across the floor, a grim reminder of the violence that had taken place in this space she once called home. The detectives quickly honed in on one suspect, Danny Brown. Neighbors had reported seeing Danny moving in and out of the house infrequently, his behavior raising suspicion. Inside the residence, a notepad with Edwina's handwriting was found. Scribbled on it were the numbers of domestic violence hotlines. It was a small but significant clue, a sign that Edwina had been seeking a way out, a way to escape the man who had held her captive for so long. Investigators also discovered that Edwina had been searching online for divorce lawyers in the days leading up to her death. She had been planning to leave, to break free from the grip of her abuser, but before she could make that escape, Danny took everything from her. Danny Brown was on the run, evading capture for weeks, but on April 17, 2023, law enforcement finally caught up with him. His arrest was swift, a culmination of a thorough investigation that left no stone unturned. He was charged with capital murder and weapon offenses. Unlike in 2012, when the evidence had been murky, this time there was no doubt. The forensic evidence, along with security footage, painted a clear picture of his involvement. The district attorney's office moved quickly to seek the death penalty for Danny. He tried to maintain his innocence, but his history of abuse and the evidence against him left no room for doubt. His bail request was denied, and the case was set to proceed, offering some semblance of justice for the woman whose life had been stolen by the very man she once loved. Edwina's story is more than just a tragedy. It's a powerful call to action. The cycle of abuse she endured for over a decade did not end in her death. It echoes a louder message to us all: we must break the cycle. We need to build better systems of education, intervention, and support for those affected by domestic violence. Every victim deserves a chance to escape, to live freely without fear. Domestic violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. It thrives in silence, hidden behind closed doors. But we can change that. By raising awareness, offering support, and empowering those in abusive relationships, we can start to dismantle the structures that allow abuse to flourish. Edwina's story is a painful reminder that without proper resources, intervention often comes too late, but it also reminds us that change is possible if we stand together. There are survivors who have broken free from their abusers and rebuilt their lives. Their stories offer hope. They show that it is possible to escape the grip of an abuser, to thrive despite the trauma. These survivors are proof that healing, while difficult, is possible. They are living testaments to the power of resilience, and their strength should inspire us all. Edwina's legacy is one of urgency. It is a legacy that demands we do more, that we do better. Her story is not just about one woman, but about all victims of domestic violence, those who have suffered in silence, those who are still suffering, and those who are struggling to find a way out. We must act now, so that no one else has to endure what Edwina did. We must support the organizations and resources that work tirelessly to combat domestic violence. There are hotlines, shelters, and counseling services that provide essential help to those in need. By getting involved and supporting these efforts, we can help create a society where abuse is not tolerated, where victims have the tools and support they need to escape. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, reach out for help. There is no shame in seeking support, and there are people who care, who want to help. Share this video, raise awareness, spread the message, and be part of the change. Together, we can ensure that the cycle of violence ends with Edwina. Together, we can create a future where love is safe and nurturing, not controlling or harmful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest true crime documentaries. Share your thoughts below. How do you think Edwina's case could have been prevented? What signs should have been noticed earlier? Join the conversation, and we'll see you in our next video.